out today. As I was saying, it is such an important theme because if we are to be clear, the digital era has expanded the horizons of policing. And in doing so, it has deepened the responsibilities that we as law enforcement bear. And it is the entire law enforcement community, which is why it's so integral for the JCF and the Fire Brigade and Direct Department of Correctional Services and other key stakeholders to gather to have these very important conversations. So we are seized with the importance of the now. We are seized with the importance of the fact that we are policing in the digital age. And it comes with new responsibilities, it comes with new rights, it comes with new things that we need to pay attention if we are to protect, to serve, protect, and reassure in the digital era. So I look forward to the conversations that we will have, but certainly the conversations that we would have must be placed in proper context. And I think the context that we will place these conversations would quite rightly be established if we invite Reverend Stacey Layla Knowles, Assistant Chaplain, to pray.
Good morning, everyone. What a wonderful privilege we have this morning to meet in a setting like this, on an occasion like this, to increase our knowledge and to do good as we continue to be a force for good. May I invite you to stand with me for prayer. Gracious, loving, almighty God, we thank you for this new day, and we are grateful that we are alive and in it. Truly, God, we are blessed that last night was not our last night. Your mercies and grace continue to abide with us and is ever present in our lives. We acknowledge, O God, that all good things come from you, and so we bless you for the opportunity to gather in this conference today. We thank you for journeying mercies that have brought us together from near and from far. We bless you for affording us the privilege of having and being a college equipped and committed to the sacred task of teaching to transform lives. And so, God, we offer to you now all that we are, all that we have, and all that we do, and we pray that this conference will be a success in every way. May the information shared be of benefit to all who will participate, and may we, in turn, use what we have garnered wisely and well in our ongoing strivings to be a force for good. Bless these proceedings now, all who lead, all who present, all who participate. Use us all for your glory, for yours is the kingdom, the power, forever and ever. Amen. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Reverend. And so, at this time, to formally welcome us and acknowledge our collective presence, I'm going to call on Assistant Commissioner of Police Merrick Watson, the Director of the National Police College of Jamaica, a fitting host, most certainly, and a key architect of today's conference. I'm going to invite ACP to come and perform that task. Put your hands together for him as he comes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis Brooks, our MC for this morning's event. Honorable guests, special invitees, ladies and gentlemen present at the National Police College of Jamaica, and those present on the virtual platform. It gives me great pleasure to extend a very cordial welcome to this data protection conference hosted by the National Police College of Jamaica. Data protection legislation plays a crucial role in safeguarding personal information in today's digitally connected world. With the vast amount of data being collected, stored, and shared, such laws are essential to protect individuals from privacy breaches, identity theft, and misuse of personal information. This conference is vital in promoting awareness, knowledge, and collaboration in the evolving landscape of information privacy and cybersecurity. Additionally, it encourages networking and partnership among stakeholders from various sectors, which creates space for meaningful dialogue on how to handle emerging threats such as cybersecurity and data breaches, and how to balance privacy with innovation. Present with us today are persons from various sectors of society whose daily responsibility involves the collection, storage, and protection of data. And so, it is definitely my pleasure to welcome these persons. I want to start out by welcoming Assistant Commissioner of Police Desmond Brooks from the Inspectorate of Professional Standard and Oversight Bureau. A very special welcome also to the speakers of the conference. And these persons are Mr. David Gray, Deputy Information Commissioner, Office of the Information Commissioner, Dr. Patrick Anglin, Data Protection Officer for the University of the West Indies, Mona, Mr. Oret Basco, Superintendent of Police from the Technology Branch of the JCF, Ms. Ivoree Cowan, Director, Compliance and Quality Management, and she's acting out of the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Wendell Lawrence, Managing Director of Spurtech Limited, and Mr. Chuck Cameron, Attorney at Law and founder of Design Privacy. I would also like to extend special welcome to Professor Ibrahim Adjugana, Vice President and Deputy President of the Caribbean, Deputy to the President of the Caribbean Maritime University. We also have with us Ms. Stacey Ann Barnes, Project Coordinator from the Pan-African Development Foundation, Ms. Marsha Francis, Legal Officer of the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Section of the United States Embassy. Welcome to Captain Hansen, Acting Registrar of the Caribbean Military Academy, Mr. Patrick Gooden, Acting Assistant Commissioner of the Jamaica Fire Brigade, Sergeant Arlene McBean, Chairman of the Jamaica Police Federation. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to CARICOM Impacts and the members from the various forces in the region who are with us via the virtual space. It is good to have you sharing with us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge the members of my management team, the management team of the National Police College of Jamaica, the wind beneath my wings, the people on whom I rely on a daily basis. They are seated here. We have SSP Aaron Fletcher, SSP Maldria Jones, Superintendent Lawrence Ogilvie, and other members of the management team of the National Police College of Jamaica. And it would be remiss of me were I not to make mention of DSP Valine Calder, who is the project manager for this conference here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, please feel welcome, and I trust that the day's proceedings will be enlightening and rewarding.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, so at this time, I think it is very important for us to have an important perspective from a key voice in this ecosystem of data protection. We have with us Mr. David Gray, Deputy Information Commissioner. So certainly, data protection, of course, we know is more than a regulatory requirement. It is now becoming increasingly a social expectation. Recent conversations that we had even within the JCF highlighted the role of what we do and the nexus with the Information Commissioner. And so to help us understand a bit of the architecture behind Jamaica's Data Protection Act and its implications for policing, I'd like to welcome this gentleman, Mr. David Gray. Put your hands together for him as he comes. My humblest apologies. We're going to make a slight change, and we're going to have Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, of course, is the Managing Director of Spurtech Limited. He will make the first presentation. Put your hands together for Mr. Lawrence.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Greetings to everyone in attendance here, all the honored guests. David Brooks, MC, thank you very much for the introduction. Those who are in the room, those who are online, two members of my team are here, Brittany Clark, operations manager in one of my companies, and Douglas, one of my software developers. All protocols observed. I'm really privileged to be in this space and to be among the voices that is speaking on this particular topic. And as I speak, I want to leave two thoughts here this morning. And the first thought is that my data is my personal property. That's the first thought. And the second thought is, someone like me, I need the help of law enforcement to help me protect my personal property. And throughout whatever I will share this morning, those are the two thoughts that I want to maintain focus on. The fact that my data is my personal property, and someone like me, I need the help of law enforcement to help me protect my personal property. Let me tell you why I'm qualified to talk on this topic. I'm not qualified to talk on this topic because I'm a security expert. I'm not. I'm not a lawyer, nor do I have experience in the professional, as a professional in that space. I haven't really studied the Data Protection Act in detail. I think there are experts here who can give consultation on that, and that I seek consultation from. My closest proximity to law enforcement was that I married the daughter of Inspector Waite, who was, I think, instrumental here. That's really the closest proximity that I have to law enforcement. But the reason why I can speak on this is because I am a well-thinking Jamaica. I have experience. I'm an experienced businessman. In the field of tech and innovation, I understand the age and the digital space that we're in. And it's clear to me that what is needed for the space that we're in now is visionary leadership and accountability. Because again, we're in an age where everybody is hyper aware that their data is their personal property. And the way how their data is being traded and consumed, they need agencies to help them protect their personal property. Data is now widely understood as a new form of currency, actively traded and highly valuable to both businesses and individuals. The global data analytics market is valued at US $112 billion in 2003, and this is from a report out of globaldata.com. 112 billion, and is projected to grow to over 189 billion by 2028. As humans, we have successfully found a way to trade information about ourselves, to commoditize information about who we are. The fact that I'm a middle-aged man, married with 3 kids, living in a certain part of the country, having certain tendencies in terms of likes and dislikes, that information is valuable to the company that knows how to use it. So we have just successfully found a way to take information about ourselves and use it as a form of currency. Some of us do it willingly. Some of us willingly trade the information about ourselves. Some of us don't know that we're doing it. Some of us are trading information and getting services and don't know that our information is being consumed and used for the services that we're consuming and using. From history, we know that wherever a commodity is highly traded, there are bad actors. There are persons who will decide that, okay, this thing is valuable. From gold come all the way to Bitcoin. Like once something is being traded, there are going to be persons who decide to go about it with ill intent. Our data is the new gold. In August last year, 2024, Loop News, in an article, shared an excerpt of the Threat Landscape Report. In Jamaica alone, there are over 400 million cyber attacks in the first half of 2024, represented a 70% drop compared to the same period last year. As to why the drop was, there are theories about why the drop is there. There are theories about the fact that with AI and persons are more pointed in their attacks, so they don't need to attack as much. They can just be, work smarter, not harder. And this does not include the average citizen who is just uncomfortable with how their data is being used and don't know what to do about it. They're just like, I went to the store, bought something, and they asked me for my email address to send the receipt. And I don't know. Now they have my email address and they have what I bought. And I don't know what they're doing with the information. I don't know if I consent to everything that is being done. I don't know if it's been sold. In my own business, we have had to make changes. We run an online platform that deals with e-commerce for multiple organizations. Hundreds of clients use our platform to collect money for varying reasons. Churches use our platform to collect tithe and offering. Event organizers use it to sell tickets. And we have had to, with the advent of the Data Protection Act, had to make adjustments, even outside of GDPR, just the awareness that our customers have now and the hypersensitivity to the fact that my data is my personal property. We have had to make changes to our platform. We're still in the process of enhancing our platform and our policies to ensure that we can empower data subjects to properly execute on their rights. You know? But in all of that, if we don't have law enforcement being able to provide the support we need, today we're talking about the importance of data protection and the awareness in law enforcement. And I'm saying that because I have data that is my personal property, all my customers, my clients have data that is their personal property, who but law enforcement, through the varying agencies, is going to help us to protect our personal property? We're talking about the importance of the awareness in law enforcement. Whereas I know that it is my personal responsibility to be vigilant with my personal data and the way that I handle the personal data of others, I also have an expectation of the agencies in the country to provide a framework to model the behavior that I need to have. We're aware of agencies like OIC, JCERT, NSOC, MOCA, and others, and what they're doing. However, it is important that for the level of awareness, it's important that the level of awareness that is needed be associated at all levels when it comes to law enforcement. In preparing for this talk, I was speaking to some of the friends I know who are a part of law enforcement. And there's the sense that there's a shared thought that not enough effort is put on the wider general knowledge. There are specific departments that are experts in it, but there seems to be a concern as to the wider general populace having the awareness. What does this awareness look like? In my mind, it falls into three things: being an example, building trust in the community, and providing meaningful support. Again, just to remind you of the two focus. My data is my personal property. And everybody's now aware of that in some way or form. And persons are more and more aware that they cannot fully watch over and police the use or access to their personal property. Being an example, law enforcement is expected to be the example of public service. There must be an awareness at all levels of operation of the fact that personal property of data subjects is being handled. This awareness must be felt by the way citizens experience the service offered. From taking an incident report to making an arrest. We are demonstrating that we are here to protect rights, even the rights associated with your data, regardless of the circumstance. How, as an organization, can we allow the people we interact with that experience our service, how can we allow them to feel like, in giving you my personal property for you to serve me, I feel like I'm putting it into good hands. When I give you my personal, like let's say for example, I have a child and I need a babysitter for a couple of hours because I need to take care of some business. When I give that child to the babysitter, the way how that babysitter receives the child and the instructions I'm giving about when it's supposed to eat, sleep, etc., the way how they receive the instructions gives me a level of confidence or not in who I'm leaving a child with. If I'm giving you my information, yes, somebody come rob me, them take this, that, and I'm giving you the incident report, somebody lick my car, I'm telling you, I'm giving you information. The way how the information is received and treated gives me the sense that you are aware that I am handing over to you my personal property. And I think that comes with, as I mentioned before, visionary leadership, recognizing that this awareness needs to transcend and be transmitted through all levels in the organization, not just the experts who need to deal with the nuanced aspects of data protection, but everyone. Next point is building trust. There are cases where an organization or individual experiences a data breach and an incident and is reluctant to report it because of the negative stigma associated with it. We have seen this in the media. We have heard of cases where there is a major breach and it's because somebody decided to come on social media and somebody decided to make a big deal of it that all the aspects of the breach is coming to the fore. There are many reasons for that. The point I'm trying to highlight is that there is a stigma. If I run a business and my business gets attacked, I start to feel now like my business is substandard because it was attacked, and there's a stigma associated with that. And so it affects the speed at which I make the decision to report it, even though I know I should. How can we as an organization in law enforcement build an environment, a culture of trust where we are encouraging collaboration, we're encouraging people sharing their experiences, sharing what happened, sharing the details that are appropriate as to what happened? How can we build an environment of trust? What does that look like? Can we have a support network? Can we support the support networks to drive that culture? The third thing is provide meaningful support. The rate at which data subjects experience breach and are required to be supported is increasing rapidly. Likewise, the rate at which support is required of law enforcement is going to drastically increase. So now, earlier I spoke about 4 million attacks. A certain percentage of those attacks would materialize into a material breach. That is not going away. There are now more sophisticated, advanced tools that, at college developer, somebody playing around in a cloud service can spin up the right set of AI tools and launch an attack on a major financial institution, leave it running overnight, leave it running for a couple of weeks, and you hear about it 4 months later. And that is not something that they have to get any major training for or spend any significant amount of money to do. And more persons are realizing that this can be done. And so AI is helping. The point I'm making is that we don't want to be the organization that is catching up, that is running behind, that is surprised at all levels. Let me share a personal incident. In my organization, we had a situation where a bad actor used our platform to complete some transactions that were questionable. And we picked up on it. We picked up on it like about a third of the way in. We realized that, oh, this was happening. And so we compiled all the data, reached out to our financial institutions that we partner with and so forth, and we were told to contact the specific department in law enforcement. And this is not a criticism. This is just me pointing out the reality and the reality for awareness. The experience that I had in dealing with that report was less than ideal. And this was years ago. This was a couple of years ago. And of note, there are several aspects of the experience that was not ideal, but of note was the level of understanding for the person that the person I was speaking to had about terms like the bin of a card, the auth code in a transaction. Why is it that we don't have all 16-digit numbers on the credit card used? There are some things that in the space that we're in, and based on the nature of the offense, you would expect that the person who is handling and about to investigate the report has a level of exposure that is a little bit above average. And again, I'm not saying this as a negative criticism. I'm pointing out, as I mentioned, we need law enforcement to help us. We're doing business, we are operating enterprises, and we are faced with bad actors, we are faced with different scenarios, and we are not in the business of enforcement. We are in the business of providing varying services to our clients. And when someone chooses to misuse the data, misuse the services that we have, we go to law enforcement to help us to protect our private property. So on the third point, there is a need for the awareness, but not just the awareness, but also the upskilling, the training of persons at all levels, basic and even beyond basic, so that when somebody comes and starts to say that somebody attacked my infrastructure and this was what we noticed, you can toe-to-toe in your conversation, and then you say, okay, I got the information, let me pass it on to the expert. You know, we're not asking for everyone to be experts. It's impractical, it's not. It will change the meaning of the word expert. But there's a need for there to be an above basic, an above average understanding of the threat that is constantly existing in the space we are living in. That's pretty much what I wanted to share. In concluding, this year's theme at the OIC's annual conference was Your Data is Power. Defend your rights. Secure your future. And it ties back to the same 2 points that I started with. My data is my private property. With it, I have the power to do multiple things. But I need your help in securing my data and helping me to secure my future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Put your hands together one more time for Mr. Wendell Lawrence for delivering our opening address here today. It is a very important context to place our conversations. Our data must be viewed as personal property, as private property, but as consumption and utilization of your data. And that is why of your data. And that is why there needs to be the proper legislative framework. And as he quite right mentioned, wherever there's going to be the potential to profit from something, there's going to be bad actors. And that's where we come in. We have to protect the nation from bad actors as it relates to data. At this time, we are running on time. I'd like to invite to, as I was saying before, to help us to understand the regulatory and legislative framework within which we operate, to help us understand the architecture of Jamaica's Data Protection Act and what that architecture, the implications for policing. I'd like to welcome a gentleman of law, a gentleman of ethics, a gentleman of public service, Mr. David Gray. Put your hands together for him.
Try it. You can use the key if you want to. Okay, that's it. So I must introduce myself.
Morning, members of the constabulary, members of persons online, members of the other forms of security forces present. The task is for me to introduce myself. So I'm a 40-year veteran of the public service. I've held several positions in government, in various entities. I was a part of customs at one stage. I was amongst the founding partners introducing GCT into Jamaica. I was the first right? I was the first and only secretary manager for the Commission for the Prevention of Corruption, which all of you know. And I also did a stint in the Integrity Commission, consulting, the Office of the Information Commissioner, and I'm here. Some persons want to know when a person is speaking to you if you have any pedigree. So I am a justice of the peace. I'm a certified fraud examiner. I hold an MBA from Manchester University. 2 first degrees, 1 in finance, 1 in law. And I'm also an attorney at law, separate and apart from that. I was called to the bar 11 years ago. So I'm going to try in a very short period of time to give you an overview of the Data Protection Act. My colleague Chuck Cameron is here, and he will be the first to tell you that your first read of the Data Protection Act is no read at all. The Data Protection Act, as simple as it may look, is very, very deep and complicated. But for law enforcement, as I will try to explain a little later, there are certain exemptions applicable to law enforcement, which will make the life of the law enforcement officer a little easier. Right? So having given you the introduction, I hope it wasn't boring and too long. We'll move along to the first slide. So of course, you know, Jamaica entered the forum of the Data Protection Act in July of 2020. And when the act was passed in 2020, there was a period of inertia. The act was passed, signed into law, but it needed an effective date. That effective date became December the 1st, 2021. And to be brutally frank and honest with you, it is a part and parcel of what is referred to as the National Identification System, NIDS. Our learned Chief Justice, in giving his ruling, more or less indicated that if you don't have a Data Protection Act in place, you can't have a NIDS. So December the 1st, 2021 began what we refer to as the transitional period. And the transitional period was for 2 years, and it was to allow Jamaican business persons and the rest of us to understand what the Data Protection Act is and what it sets out to do. After that first 2-year period, come December 23, again, as a result of lobbying from the business sector, and it was a proven fact that a lot of entities were not fully ready for the imposition of a Data Protection Act. Come December the 1st, 2023, additional provisions of the Act were brought into operation. Now you're going to ask, transitional period and then additional specified provisions brought into the Act, because although the Act has been passed, certain powers under the Act have not yet been brought into operation. Those will include the whole host of penalties that may come underneath the Act that has not yet been brought into operation. All right? Without me saying much more, you can understand why there was the period of inertia, because the regulations to accompany the Act were gazetted in March and April of 2024. I say no more. I've given you pictorially what the gazettes look like, so you can, in your own time, get them. But what's important for me is that it shows you how the Act was brought into operation. And it basically tells you the sections which are in operation. So if you do get a Data Protection Act, you have to read it alongside this gazette and literally tick the sections that have been brought into operation. And in relation to some sections or parts of the Act, specific subsections have been brought into operation, and the remainder not yet. That is because of the complexities of the Act, and some of them impact penalties, investigative operations, and at the present time, the thinking is the scope and knowledge of the Act for a lot of the actors has not yet reached to that. And if those were brought in, it may become an impediment to business operations. Now, law enforcement and every single one of us, we need to just understand these critical things. And if we understand this, whether you're a law enforcement or a normal everyday citizen, you are perfect. Personal data. Information, however, stored relating to a living individual or an individual who has been deceased for less than 30 years. So personal data is any information relating to a living individual or an individual who has been deceased for less than 30 years. Critical. So you and I, anything about us, your name, your address, your TRN, whether you're short, whether you have a scar on your face, any distinguishing feature. And that data is of importance up to 30 years after you have died. Right? In giving talks, I always say to persons that we have always heard of Butch Stewart, now deceased, 2-3 years. But of course, his real name is Gordon Stewart. Butch, always in quotes, but it is his personal data, because once you say Butch, you're either speaking to Butch Hendrickson or Butch Stewart. So it becomes as synonymous with using your name as any other feature, and that constitutes personal data. And Mr. Stewart's family can enforce his rights up to 30 years after he has died by virtue of anyone who may choose to infringe upon his rights. Sensitive personal data, of course, means any personal data, so it of course comprises a living person or a person who has been deceased for less than 30 years, but it consists of any of the following: your genetic or biometric data, your affiliation, your racial or ethnic data, political opinions, your philosophical beliefs, your religious beliefs, membership in any trade union, physical, mental health or condition, your sex life, alleged commission of any offense. And genetic data means the DNA as evidenced by the DNA Evidence Act. Sensitive personal data and the distinction between both is particularly important in the area of law enforcement, and particularly important for us all to understand. When you're handling personal data, depending on the amount that you may handle, the reach that you have in dealing with the data, you are not required to have a particular creature under the Act named the Data Protection Officer. But once you touch on concern sensitive personal data, as defined by the statute, you must have a DPO. And I'll also indicate to you, persons in the private sector, like my friend Mr. Cameron, he may not be required to have a DPO dependent on how his business operates and the span and the size and a whole host of variables. But once you're in the public sector, you must have a DPO. And that is an entirely new industry that is being created. Your health record, and I put it in because as law enforcement, you are going to touch on concern, in some instances, health records. Of course, it's any record in the custody of a health professional. And it more or less consists of information on the physical or mental health or condition of an individual, and it will tell you about their diagnosis, their treatment, genetic data, testing, donation of any body part. I know for a lot of you, when you're investigating a murder, you may have to touch health records. Health records are sensitive data, and how you deal with sensitive data is of utmost importance. Another very important definition that you need to be aware of, and I've alluded to one portion of it already, the data controller. So if you get nothing else from me, types of data, sensitive and personal and sensitive, we now move to who is a data controller. And the easiest way to say it is exactly how the statute says it. It means any person. And as you know, a person can be any juristic person. Right? Or public authority. Public authority under law is anything in which the government of Jamaica owns or controls or has majority interest in. So we don't have majority interest in Jamaica Public Service anymore, so it is no longer a public authority. Right? Who either alone or jointly or in common with other persons determines the purposes for which and the manner in which any personal data are or are to be processed, and where personal data are processed only for the purposes for which they are required under any enactment to be processed, the person on whom the obligation to process the personal data is imposed by or under that enactment is for the purposes of this act a data controller. If there has ever been a circuitous way of defining a term, you have heard it. And this is what the law says. Easiest way to say it can be any person, any public authority who has, for the most part, the ability to determine how personal data is to be processed. And once you can do that, you become a data controller. So, slow down now. Some of us who have our own private business arrangements or little businesses where we employ individuals, we keep an Instagram account that we shoot out information to them, telling them that the products that we have available and you are free to visit and purchase. You are a data controller. And by virtue of that, the statute requires that you become registered as a data controller. And I make that distinction because a lot of persons are of the view that the Data Protection Act is only applicable to big people running very big business. The mere fact that you may have a WhatsApp group for the same purpose, it means that you are collecting data. And that data is a part of the regime of the Data Protection Act. And so that's pretty important. So understand that a data controller is not just government, is not just the big business people, it can be you and I. Next critical one that you'll want to understand, of course, is a data subject. Again, means a named or otherwise identifiable individual who is the subject of personal data, and in determining whether an individual is identifiable, account shall be taken of all means used or is likely to be used by the data controller or any other person to identify the individual, such as reference to an identification number or other identifying characteristics, whether physical, social, or otherwise, which are reasonably likely to lead to the identification of the individual. Again, straight from the statute, straight from the circuitous route of how the lawmakers have chosen to define it. But it is so wide that it takes up whether you're named, however you can identify them, and it includes any reference to an identification number, your TRN, your NIDS number, your electoral ID card, whether you are in a Rolodex and your Rolodex is numbered 1 to 50, so therefore customer number 20 has bought 2 pairs of shoes, and I'm going to be writing it down in that Rolodex to say that this is what is outstanding. Whether physical, social, or otherwise, so you have a dimple on your forehead which is labeled in your passport, that you have that marking, it all fits in this definition. It is that wide. And as law enforcement persons, you may want to be aware that it is that wide. Right? Alias names and all of that. Everything. Just like I was reading one of the articles, I think you said a man named Bop, only known by the alias Bop. I guess if you go into the community and you ask for Bop and a man point out that that is the data subject. Right? The simplest way I can figure it out. Your third most important definition, it would be the fourth. Data processor. In relation to personal data means any person other than an employee of the data controller who processes that data on behalf of the data controller. So you have your entity, you contract Design Privacy to do some work on it for you. Design Privacy is your data processor, simply put. Of course, Design Privacy is also a data controller in its own right. So you can find that entities find themselves in 2 buckets, one as a processor and one as a controller. Right? Now the stricture is you must ensure, because the law or the onus in relation to the legislation resides on the data controller. Any data that you have, anything that you're going to be doing with that data, you are responsible as the data controller. So if you're going to choose a processor, you must ensure that this processor is up to par. Right? And they must put in place technical and organizational measures. Big word meaning they must have in place protections so that whatever they're doing with your data, no breach occurs. And although that is theoretically impossible, that if a breach occurs, they report it quickly. Right? Of course, as an attorney, everything that you do for me must be in a contract. It's not a oral discussions don't really work well for my hearing aid. So it really needs to go in a written document so that we all know where we stand, when we stand, and if it is that I'm to push you over, I know exactly when I can. Eh? And of course, process, more or less I've alluded to it. Obtaining, recording, or storing the information or data, carrying out any operation or set of operations, whether or not by automated means on the data, and that will include organizing it, adapting it, altering it, retrieving it, consulting it, disclosing it by transmitting, disseminating, or otherwise making it available, aligning, combining, blocking, erasing, or destroying, rendering the data anonymous. The law goes to this height to protect the data subject, because that's what this legislation is intended to do, protect the data subject. So of course, capturing the critical thing, data controller, your company, you are controlling, reviewing, comparing, aggregating your personal data and the data subject. And that batch of slides, all I want you to remember out of all of this, data subject, data controller, and the types of data that exist. Because you're going to have to read the statute to go deeper into it for the nuances. Data controllers, as I told you, are the most critical set of people under the statute, and all liability flows to them in relation to how they handle data. So they have to be registered, and they have to provide certain requirements. It's an offense not to have done so, but as I have pointed out to you before, some of the offense provisions have not yet been brought into operation. So again, as law enforcement, you may come into, in your investigation, somebody who is processing data, who you may ask them, are you registered? And the answer is no, and that answer can lead to a charge. Right? But they have to provide registration particulars. It's very expansive. So I'm going to breeze through it because it may not be something that is easily digested. But before they start anything, they must understand the measures that they have in place. That they have in place to protect the data, and they have to be aware, and we as the data protection agency have to be aware of any breach which occurs. And in registering, name, address, contact details. If you have a representative, and why we use representative? Because not all data controllers are domiciled in Jamaica. They may be operating in Jamaica, and by virtue of the statute, they have to appoint a local representative. All the particulars of that person will have to be given. As I mentioned to you before, public authority must have a data protection officer. Persons who are in the private sector, depending on the volume of data and particular characteristics of the data that they're handling, they may not be required to have a data protection officer. But the particulars include the fact that you must identify that person. What is the data that is being processed? And what categories do they relate? So it's invoice data, which is customer data. What does customer data include? Name, address, amount outstanding, invoice, all manner of particulars. description of the purpose or purposes for which the data is being or are being processed. Who is it being shared with? Do you transfer the data outside of Jamaica? Very, 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 very important. It's a very weighty one, because under the Data Protection Acts all over the world, you have a term which is referred to as data reciprocity. It means that if you are transferring the data outside of Jamaica, it has to be transferred to a country that has like laws. Under the GDPR, which is the European version of the Data Protection Act, a part of their legislation is that unless a reciprocating country has data protection laws in place, no information can be shared with that country. I'm a St. Mary man that comes with banana. You can imagine if you don't have data reciprocity legislation and I am trading in banana, of which the greatest share of that production goes to the UK market. It means trade is non-existent. And I noticed that a couple of eyes have opened wider. It is because, as I tell you, you have to read this statute. But when you read this statute, international trade is now wider in your thinking, just by virtue of the names of any states outside of Jamaica to which the data controller directly or indirectly transfers personal data. Data reciprocity is an entire study of itself. But just those simple words is tantamount to that. Where the data controller is a public authority, a statement of that fact. As I mentioned to you before, once you are a public authority, you must have a data protection officer. Registration requires that you indicate whether you are a public authority. And once you are a public authority and you have not named a data protection officer, you cannot be registered. The process is there. Go to our website, create the user account. From the user account, the registration form will be made available to you. Once you have entered all of the registration particulars, and we tend to use the word payment of a processing fee. Seemingly, for the big business persons, it was much more palatable to use a processing fee rather than to use any other word. Persons view it as a form of tax. So we say a fee for processing. Right? Once the information is verified, you will then be notified and you will be placed on the register. Don't bother kill us. We're still going through the teething pains. So a lot of entities which have supplied their information are still being verified and have yet to be placed on the register. But the register for law enforcement is a public document. So literally, just like when I was a part of GCT and you were going to pay your tax, the first thing you looked around for is the GCT registration certificate. Similarly, you have a register. You can also look to see, before I give you my information, are you on the register? But as I said before, bear with us. And of course, if you fail to register, penalties can become applicable. How am I doing for time? Right? Good. DPO. More or less, I've told you about that person. Data controller, person, public authority, the criterion being process large volumes of data. That term is not defined under the Act. What do you mean by large volumes of data? But anecdotally, it would cover such things as number, the various types, where it is, whole host of situations such as that. And for the persons who are legally and technical, we would go to the GDPR and look to see if they have already identified what it is and use that as a guide. Right? Now, the DPO, in the scheme of things, is a very, 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 very important person. Again, the law lists no qualification for this person. Absolutely none. So to say that the person must have a degree in this or that, it's not there. Right? All that the law says is that a person shall not be qualified for appointment if there is or is likely to be any conflict of interest between the person's duties as a data protection officer and any other duties of that person. So the governing criteria can be anybody in your organization, but in relation to that role, there can be no conflict in relation to what they do. So of course, it renders your IT director totally out, because he's the one that's governing the system. So he can't be the data protection officer. And under the GDPR, of course, and under our regulations, that person has to report to someone at a fairly senior level in the organization. That again means that it can't be the clerical officer. And we have also more or less issued guidance which would suggest that the person, that person or contracted person, because it doesn't have to be one, can be a business that you contract, has to be a person that knows or have some knowledge of IT, have some knowledge of law, have some knowledge of customer service principles. It's a person that you may have to create. Because no one person as it is now has all of that. All that you see me standing in front of you and telling you, I would have acquired that within the last 3 years. Because I'm a tax accountant. That's the area of accounting that I play with. That's totally different from this. And then I added law to it. And then this. That's a whole heap of years to reach to this. So for a fledgling location like Jamaica, we're going to have to be building that pool of persons. And as I pointed out to you before, it's a new growth area. And I make no bones to say it. Some of us are planning our lives. Right? we're asking ourselves, I am going to be retiring in X years. What am I going to do after retirement if my brain is still agile and my body as well? Have a look. Have a look. Right? What are the functions? Ensuring the data controller processes data in compliance with the data protection standards. I'll carry you through that shortly. Consulting with the commissioner to resolve any doubt, read the provisions of the Act. You're a consultative role, but you are going to have to understand as the DPO, while you are employed by the data controller, your onus and responsibilities lie with the Information Commission. Right? You are ensuring that any contravention of the standards are addressed in accordance with the Act. What does that mean? Data subject makes a complaint about their information being disclosed, or no, let me use one which I had to think out the other day. And it's very important that possibly I bring it out. We all have cameras on our homes for protective purposes. Right? And ideally, our cameras span the entire throughput of our yard. True? Now I want to hear it, True. Right? Now, the cameras, by virtue of how they are mounted, allows us strategic views of other areas. Correct? Right? Some of those areas include areas owned or controlled by our neighbors. Our neighbor can complain that their privacy is being infringed because your camera is for your location, not to pass in your neighbor's yard. Eh? So we're going to have to do a rethink now that we have a data protection law in place, how we address certain things. Right? Your camera must be for your location. Right? And if your neighbor is aware that you're sitting in your yard and watching their camera and seeing everything in their yard, they can make a complaint and ask that you rectify it. And if you don't do something about it, then it can create another bone of contention. Right? So we have to spend some time working that through. It's why in a lot of the stores now you see they put up some signs, cameras, 24-hour surveillance in place, right? Because they may have a lawful right to have cameras in place, right? You and I have a lawful right to have cameras in place to protect our property, not to look in the neighbor's property, right? So we have to think out a lot of things. Assist data subjects in the exercise of their rights. Now, if you are a charitable and you process data only for a public register, non-profit, established for a political, philosophical, religious, or trade union purposes, you're not required to appoint a data protection officer. I will make no comment in relation to that. right? Appropriately qualified person in an independent, to monitor in an independent manner, compliance with the law. Conflict, once you have a conflict, you can't be appointed. Look at the duties, I've mentioned that. The data protection officer, shortened form DPO, can be a staff member or employed on a contractual basis. Report to a person at a senior level in the organizational structure. If you are a data controller and you appoint a DPO outside of Jamaica, who operates from outside of Jamaica, you have to have a local one. And a DPO can be for more than one entity. But in being for more than one entity, they have to be able to prove they can handle the work and that there is no conflict of interest. The data controller, me as the data subject, and the DPO, we are to ensure we set out to deal with the rights of data subjects. And we have certain rights which the law seeks to enforce. We have a right of access and to be informed of all the data that is being utilized or processed on our behalf. We have a right to prevent the processing of data in specified circumstances. Using that right with the first standard in mind of utmost importance, that it's being done fairly and lawfully. Right? If you have the time, sections 21, 22, 23 of the DPA will carry you through, because to go into that era is an exercise of a day. Because we're going to have to look at other jurisdictions to fill in the blanks where this law is. But fairly and lawfully is pretty important. Personal data that has been obtained must only be used for the specified purpose for which it has been obtained. And the law says you must not use it in any manner incompatible with that purpose. What do I mean by that? If you are taking, easier. When it is that you go in to change your chip at your telephone provider, you have given them your name, your address, and the details for the purpose of obtaining a chip. You never ask them to mark it nobody business to you. The standards afford you the power to say stop it. Right? Okay. Right? Third one is the data that is being taken should be adequate, relevant, and limited for the purposes for which it's being processed. Right? So that again, in broad terms, means all of us have a hatred of forms. And I know when we're filling out forms, we ask ourselves the question, why am I asking for this information? Right? One of the standards say when you're collecting data, you're only collecting that data which you require. So if you're not a doctor, asking me what is my blood type for me to get a credit card is rude and out of order.
Recording in progress.
Right? So you need to understand all of it. And when you go through the literature, Each of these standards are shortened in terms of data minimization and a whole host of terms. But I've stuck with the legislation because when you decide to go deeply into it, that's when you need to know the synonymous terms. Right? Personal data shall be kept accurate and where necessary, up to date. You and I know money laundering legislation. You've heard the term KYC, know your customer. It is the standard. Right? So data protection also affects money laundering legislation. It comes from it. Data that is being kept shall be kept no longer than is necessary for that purpose. So we all started out by buying furniture from possibly courts, and we gave them a whole host of information because we couldn't buy the thing cash the first time. So we do a little hire purchase transaction. But 20 years later, why does courts need to have my information on file? I am no longer an active customer. That information is supposed to be deleted, destroyed, made anonymous, unusable. And anytime you have, in some instances, a breach of the Data Protection Act or a breach occurring, it is because this data is still being kept, it's no longer being used, and it's put on what they consider to be an archaic computer, which all it needs is a youngster with a scamish intention to turn it on and say, this thing works. And then use their phones, pick, 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 pick. Name, address, TRN, all sort of information. Whether it's valid or not, it doesn't need to be. All we need is the information. And we can make a world. Data is the new gold. And that's why in the US your social security number is guarded. Even your neighbor doesn't know your social security. That opens every single door. And when we do get to full-scale launch of a NINS, which if we understand it, it may be that one unique number that opens your birth certificate, your passport, and every single thing, then you know that number is going to be locked tight. Because with one set of numbers, you know everything. Right? Appropriate technical and organizational measures, meaning you put in place computer security. You're in time? All right. And of course, I mentioned the transferring of data to other territories. And fairly and lawfully, you'll get the slides, I hope. Of course, you'll have the authority to collect the data subject information, specified purposes, accuracy, storage, right? Now, important conditions that in standards is the matter of consent. And consent is to be freely given, must be informed, specific, and unequivocal. So you can't bribe me to get my consent. When you are getting documents via email, the long-standing practice has been to move right down to the bottom where it says, I agree, and we tick, and we move on, because we said this thing too long to read. And I just want to get my Facebook account so that I can do my thing. I'm going to say to you, start reading, because embedded in page 22 of 38 is one little clause which says that you agree to share your information on all platforms owned or controlled by. And then you start to ask yourself the question, how did I get all of this? You gave the permission. Right? Just like there is a science to outfitting a supermarket. I learned it as a taxman. You don't do certain things. You don't put certain things at the front shelf. You put meat at the back because you have to walk past every single shelf to get to the meat. And what does that mean? While you're walking, oh, you know, I needed that. Right? So it is a science. There is a science in everything. Technical measures now which, as a law enforcement person, you'll want to spend some time on to protect: access controls, encryption, data anonymization, endpoint security, big terms. But in your private life, ensure that you're using your laptop, you have virus protection on it. And ensure it's up to date. Now, some of our phones are more powerful than laptops. So it's the same rule applicable. A 512 KB phone is more powerful than some laptops. And you walk around without putting a password on it. Right? Rethink it. Two-point authentication. Pretty important. For me, it's eyes, thumb, code. Yeah. Meaning my eyes only carry me to stage 2 of opening my book. Then you have to use a thumb. And then 6 digits. Think it out. If you are doing banking on your phone, if you are doing banking on your phone, you will want to ensure that if by chance you leave the phone here and you are gone around there, and when you come back you don't see your phone, right? I use an Apple with a locator so I can shut it down. So again, you have to figure it out. What's good for you is good for you. Exemptions, law enforcement, national security implications as evidenced by the appropriate minister. What does that mean? Again, that's an exercise in an entire day. But the minister, the appropriate minister, can give a certificate. And that certificate exempts the law enforcement officer from certain provisions of the Data Protection Act. The certificate that is being given has to be very specific and detailed. It's not a wide open situation, but it's tailor-made, specific for the matter that has national security implications. law enforcement, taxation, certain statutory functions. Of course, disclosures required by law are made in connection with legal proceedings. Of course, when you give testimony in court, you know you're breaching data protection standards. But once you're making the disclosure in relation to legal proceedings, the Act allows it. Eh? Protection of all of us, you have the data protection impact statement. That section of the Act is not yet in force. It's one of the major tools to protect us all, but it's not yet there. So of course, obligations. Two pretty slides that you can more or less remember. Register, appoint a DPO if necessary, do your data protection impact assessment, report a contravention or breach. Whether you're in your private sphere or you're in an entity, of which the Jamaica Constabulary Force is one, have an incident response plan. Incident response plan identifies what steps are going to be taken in the case of there being a data breach. My friends, do not leave this thing to chance. Who is to say what, when, where, how, why is the most important thing as a manager you will ever have. Takes one incident to destroy the credibility of an organization. So when you're looking on this, this is a manual of itself. You have 72 hours after a breach has occurred to inform the Information Commissioner. Now, again, I know the time is against me, but I'm about done anyway. 72 hours for me and you is 3 days. Right? The law didn't use the word 3 days. It used the words 72 hours. If you are aware of the breach having occurred at 5 o'clock Friday evening, you have 72 hours from that time to make your report. The clock starts to tick. Technicalities like me and others in the room, when we see the word 3 days, we will then say 3 working days as against 3 calendar days and all of those niceties. 72 hours is plain and simple. 72 hours. And it's Form 7 in the regulations. It's 7 pages long of all the information that you'll have to detail if there is a breach. And that is where your DPO comes in. And it would be remiss of me to begin to end without saying this part. You have a Data Protection Act, you have data protection laws, you have standards to be enforced, rights to be protected. It will all come to naught if you don't train. Right? And as I said, training is on internet security, password safety, mobile security. What are the best practices? What is ransomware and how do we treat with ransomware? What's identity theft? What is phishing? Earlier this year, I was getting a lot of alerts from j.n.c.b.com to update my account. Notice I said j.n.c.b. The human eye doesn't read everything. It looks at the first digit, and it saw J and it saw N, and our mind said, oh, jncb.com is telling me to click here to update my account. The minute you click here, you've gone into a thief's paradise. Because it asks you for your name, your address, input your account number. Why would JNCB ask me for my account number when they have the account? And by the time you finish all of that, which you're going to be doing so methodically, and I almost want to say so accurately, the minute you press send, the criminal has wiped out your account. And how did he do it? You gave it to him. Right? So again, I say, let's slow down and let's read these things. J.N.C.B. is not the same as JNCB. So read it. Read it. So we understand internet security. That's one of the first things you tell persons. And tell your children, adult children, grandchildren, whatever they be. Read these things. A lot of stuff is now being done via your phone. Lot of text messages telling you update this, update that. Older person will tell you, I long for the simple life when I just go into the bank account, fill out my withdrawal slip, and you give me my money. Right? As against now, log in, put in all of the particulars, and are transferring money all over the world. Right? Simple life. What are the controls? Use the terms already. Data minimization, meaning the minimum amount of data. Data retention policies, where you're keeping the data for, how long are you keeping it? Look at your software development practices. Stop take the bootleg Microsoft Word package, because when you see the new one, it's very expensive. The criminals embed codes in it, and from a remote location, they're reading every step that you have done. For the entities, of course, the constabulary force, do your penetration testing of all the data that you have. Don't believe, my friend, that because you're the constabulary force, nobody would never want to break into the force. I think I read last week, them broke in our station or somewhere and thief something. And you'd think, really, you don't have no respect in life. You got broke in a station. But they did it. Right? Vendor management, your incident response plan, logging and monitoring, simple things as giving information, have your logs in place, train. Of course, you have your enforcement mechanism. That is not yet in place, but I want to point out to you, almost all data protection acts have a clause in there. You may not be able to see it, but I'll read it to you. Where a body corporate commits an offense under the act, the body corporate shall be liable to a fine not exceeding 4% of their annual gross worldwide turnover of that body, corporate for the preceding year of assessment. I want you to think about 4% of your worldwide turnover. Look at a Scotiabank, that if a fine is levied of 4% of your worldwide turnover, the quantum of fine that is. Russia levied a fine, I believe, the other day. The figure had so many zeros on it that I don't think to this date it has been pronounced what that number is. But it shows the seriousness of there being a breach or a fine being imposed. And it carries you to why it's important that when you are dealing with the matter of breach, who says what, where, when, how, and why is clearly defined. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how you get in touch with us. Persons do respond. I know that persons say they've been calling and people don't answer. But persons do respond. Persons are blinded because we have been reading so many things. But as we grow and input more persons, we will become a better organization. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that. Put your hands together for him one more time, please. Thank you very much for considerable food for thought. I could see the wheels turning in many people's minds because they're acutely aware of the fact that as members of the constabulary, we at one time or another may or may not have been a data processor or a data controller, or maybe sometimes we are operating in some respects in our professional or other life as a DPO of sorts. And it is important for us to understand our roles and responsibilities within the legislative framework, which is so important. You know, I remember recently we published an episode of a podcast, and immediately reporters were calling me and asking me, give me a number for Superintendent Kerry Bailey, please, because, I want to interview her. And immediately I said, well, let me ask her, because I don't know, maybe she has her public number. I don't know, does her phone number count as personal data? Oh, there you go. There you go, because everybody wanted to get in touch with her. But it was a very sobering presentation. Definitely something that we will, I am certain, get into as the panel discussions unfold later on in the conversation. But as you keep on saying, data is the new oil. It's why everybody wants to mine into it. And no wonder we end up with people. We in the Jamaica Constabulary Force are very aware of the emails that we get about various things, payroll matters, this new promotional program, just click here and you could get into this promotional program. And what they always do is try to make it relevant to the interests of the members, and so we have a responsibility to them. Thinking, sir, as listening to your presentation, that we have a very important responsibility, yes, to the external customer in terms of the information, the personal data that we collect, but various formations within the force have a very important responsibility, I would imagine, under the Data Protection Act, to the internal customer, to the members, whether it's the welfare department, whether it's the federation, whether it's HR, whether it's admin. We get to know people's business, and people have very sensitive information about the people that we work with on a daily basis. People bring their sick leave information. People, are being considered before the medical board. All of this is very, very sensitive information that we as members of the constabulary, not only for the external customer, but in terms of the internal customer, must consider. We're back online?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, good. We're back online. And all right, so the update is that our lunch break is ready. And so we're going to, sorry, not lunch break, our coffee break is ready. We're going to take our coffee break now. So have a bit of coffee, if that's your preference, have some refreshment. And when we return, we will get into our next presentations, ladies and gentlemen. All right, our coffee break is a mere 15 minutes. That should be enough. attention span assured to take us into the luncheon interval. So we will move into our next presentation. Well, our next presenter was born in Clarendon and is a proud alumna of Glenmuir High. I don't know if it's a breach of her data privacy, but my intelligence gives me reliable information that she spent 2 good years at the Queen's School. She holds a bachelor's degree in international relations and public sector management from the UWI, along with a master's degree in governance and public policy. She began her public service career as a police officer, dedicating 8 years to law enforcement before transitioning to central government in 2019. Her career in the public sector spans several key ministries, including finance and the public service, agriculture and fisheries and Parliament, our parent ministry. She is a certified project management professional and an ISO 31000 certified risk manager with over a decade of experience in strategic planning, governance, and compliance, and she is currently the acting director of compliance and quality management at the Ministry of National Security. She's led the successful implementation of the ministry's data protection program supported by Design Privacy. And so I think it is quite fitting for Ivoree Cowan to help talk us through how we operationalize, how we make it practical and doable, this thing called data protection. Put your hands together for her as she comes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Let me just say good morning, colleagues, to those online. Of course, my batchmates, I'm sure they're all there. My former lecturers, good morning. My former commanding officer, good morning to you. My former commandant, Mr. Watson, Merrick Watson, good morning. So this place is not very unfamiliar to me. And of course, my colleague right here in front of me, Mr. Basco, good morning. All right, so the focus of this presentation is to highlight practical strategies for operationalizing data protection within law enforcement. Our approach, of course, is aligned to Vision 2030 and the Data Protection Act that fosters trust, accountability, and lawful data handling. Jamaica's Vision 2030 Jamaica's Vision 2030 aims to make our country the place to live, work, raise families, and do business. Our compliance efforts directly contribute to the vision by upholding governance, transparency, and the rights of every citizen. The data protection agenda supports national outcomes on security, justice, and effective governance. M&S pursues its objectives through the implementation of robust policy, legislative, regulatory, and operational framework. These strategies are cascaded across the portfolio entities. The ministry's priorities are aligned with Jamaica's Vision 2030 and the SDGs. The data governance protection of personal rights contributes to effective governance and national security. Strategic priorities of crime reduction, public order, and safety supports Goal 1 of the Vision 2030, where security of Jamaica is ensured, and the commitment to SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions through safeguarding data rights and enhancing law enforcement effectiveness. Why protect personal data? And this I must give credit to the Office of the Information Commissioner on their LinkedIn page. I encourage you all to follow their page. Very critical information is shared there, and the information is quite useful. I'm sure protecting our personal data was underscored by our previous presenter because it helps to prevent identity theft. I'm sure you recall him talking about 3 different layers to get into his cell phones. It preserves your reputation, minimize the risk of harm, control your information, and maintain financial security. Of course. And I'm sure many of you in this room may be a victim of a phishing link, maybe to one of these popular institutions. And maybe if you are not a victim, you know someone. It's all too familiar to us. These phishing links are real, and in the snap of an eye, your account is at 0. The regulatory requirements under the DPA, I'm just reinforcing it because it's absolutely critical. It mandates all organizations, to include the JCF, to register with the OIC, report the breaches within 72 hours, and of course, appoint a data protection officer. The Jamaica Constabulary Force commitment to data protection plays a critical role in strengthening public trust, enhancing operational integrity, and safeguarding officers from legal and disciplinary risk. By upholding the rights of data subjects, the JCF fosters greater community cooperation and encourages intelligence sharing. Operational integrity is enhanced. There will be an increase in integrity in evidence handling as it supports successful prosecutions through lawful data practices. These efforts reinforces the accountability and reduce the risk of penalties under the Jamaica Data Protection Act. Additionally, the JCF focuses on data privacy and it supports compliance with international standards, positioning the JCF to meet global expectations and facilitate effective cross-border cooperation. Together, these actions strengthens trust, enhances integrity, safeguard personnel, and support modern, accountable policing that aligns with both national priorities and global best practices. Let's speak a little on the regime. The data protection compliance regime represents the organization's commitment to responsible and ethical use of personal and sensitive data. It ensures that all data processing activities respects the rights and freedoms of individuals as required under the law. At the heart of data privacy, compliance are the policies, procedures, and practices we implement to meet those obligations. The primary goal is to strike a balance between operational need to collect and use data and the individual's right to privacy and control over their personal information. This balance builds trust, promotes accountability, and reinforces lawful data handling throughout the organization. Let's talk about a risk management plan. That is a critical tool. It serves as a strategic framework that strengthens data governance, safeguards personal information, and fosters public trust. It enables the organization to proactively identify, assess, and mitigate risks associated with data processing while ensuring alignment with the Jamaican Data Protection Act. The plan provides for risk mitigation strategies, the practice of conducting compliance gap assessments to help identify vulnerabilities. The development of a compliance roadmap will prioritize actions based on risk exposure and the impacts. In essence, risk management plan outlines how risk will be managed and controlled to support data protection objectives. It ensures that compliance is systematic, measurable, and integrated into daily operations. Core data protection policies, such as the data protection policy in general, records retention and disposal policy, data breach notification policy are only a few of the policies that may need to be developed within your organization. And these should be developed and approved alongside the support of standard operating procedures that will reflect the compliance needs, including processes like handling the data subject's requests. A macro-level policy approach is recommended when drafting these policies because there needs to be an alignment with the existing policies in the organization. In draft or published policies and laws, of course, policies should remain iterative with periodic reviews to adapt to environmental changes and policy developments. It's recommended that your policies are reviewed every 2 years at the very least because the environment is always changing. Compliance and building awareness. Our former presenter spoke about the need for training, sensitization. That's absolutely critical. Training and sensitization, along with effective communication, are the critical pillars for building and sustaining a data protection compliance culture. It highlights the importance of conducting role-specific training, developing onboarding modules for new staff, and embedding data protection policies into divisional work plans and the strategic business plan. It is important to leverage communication as a strategic tool. The JCF has a brilliant strategic communication arm. Leverage it. The use of communication tools such as awareness campaigns, posters, email reminders, and events like data privacy days can be used to reinforce key compliance messages and foster ongoing engagement across the organization. I just want to refer to some in-context issues. The traffic tickets management system, Jamaica Eye, body camera, license plate reader, are only some of the new technologies that the JCF has now leveraged as a part of its investigative tools. And it serves to strengthen the investigative capabilities of the JCF while upholding the rights of the data subject. The tools are not designed for indiscriminate surveillance, but are instead deployed in a targeted, lawful, and proportionate manner. Information collected through these systems is accessed and used only when necessary, specifically in circumstances where an individual becomes relevant to an investigation or an enforcement activity. This approach aligns with the legal authority of law enforcement to identify and apprehend individuals involved in criminal acts while ensuring that data processing respects the rights and the necessity, the proportionality, and the accountability as required under the Acts. The use of these technologies therefore supports public safety objectives without compromising privacy rights of the individuals. Let's speak a bit on operationalizing compliance. Embedding privacy by design into systems ensures that data protection considerations are integrated from the outset and at every project and not as an afterthought. This approach includes conducting a data protection impact assessment that was mentioned earlier, and this is required for high-risk processing activities, making data protection a standard requirement in project scoping and procurement. This proactive strategy helps to minimize risk and ensure compliance with data protection obligations throughout project execution. Leveraging data protection communities of practice supported by the use of AI will be very important and very helpful. Establishing data governance structures is essential to effective data protection compliance. This involves clearly defining the roles and responsibilities across key functions such as IT, legal, human resources, and support staff, this team will ensure accountability and, of course, the assignment of a data protection officer. I cannot underscore that enough. That's a critical element of the compliance framework. The formation of a data protection working committee. We have that at the Ministry of National Security, and it's very helpful. We have established a meeting cadence, but not just the meeting cadence, we have a charter, and that helps to strengthen the oversight of that working committee. Our meeting cadence, we meet every week. Because data protection is still new, there are always concerns, and it is an opportunity to share knowledge. So once we meet every week, we discuss our policies because the ministry is currently about to roll out all its policies. We're at our approval stage. And so we discuss all those matters at our working committee meeting. Training and awareness, very critical. It's critical for building that capacity across the organization, supported by well-defined policies, regular audits, and assessments. Finally, the creation of a data protection network fosters collaboration, knowledge sharing, and continuous improvement in safeguarding personal data. Our data protection network at the Ministry of National Security was just approved, and we'll be rolling that out. We look forward to engage with the JCF and your DPOs so we can discuss matters concerning law enforcement. Data mapping and audits. Conducting a data process assessment, building a data inventory, and performing gap analysis are critical steps in establishing an effective data protection compliance framework. When the ministry rolled out its data protection program, that was one of the first critical steps. Design Privacy was our consultant. They assisted us in conducting that data mapping exercise. And the activities involved reviewing how personal data was collected, processed, and stored and shared while ensuring that the purpose for each data category was clearly defined. Through data mapping and classification, the organization can apply the right level of safeguard based on the sensitivity of the data that is collected. Coming out of the data mapping exercise, the gap analysis was developed, and the gap analysis compares our current practices, which is prior to the Data Protection Act, and the now new dispensation. Doing that gap analysis helped us to identify the risk, the compliance gaps, and the areas of improvement. By prioritizing corrective actions through structured approach, the organization was able to handle data processing activities aligned adequately with the legal obligations, enhancing accountability, reducing risk, and supporting overall data governance objectives. Communication strategy. The Ministry of National Security has just rolled out our communication strategy in a big way. So it is important, very critical, to communicate to your stakeholders. To promote that culture of data protection compliance, it is important to develop engaging communication, compliance do's and don'ts, posters addressing common scenarios such as mobile device use. I mean, in the organization, we collect so much data over our cell phones, and it's just a quick share. Sometimes police officers just click and share with another person, and all of that information that is contained within that text message or WhatsApp message has a lot of personal data, sensitive data. So it's important that the communication strategy is geared towards reducing those non-compliant behaviors. Emphasis must be placed on personal responsibility with clear reminders, like locking your screen when you're away. So many times we move away from our desk. We were working on critical information, sensitive data was contained, and we just walk away to address another matter. It's important that we lock our screens. Do not share your login credentials. Report suspected breaches immediately. You only have 72 hours. Reinforcing these practices through daily briefing sessions, utilizing end of shift briefing and debriefing, it's important to reinforce the importance of data protection. It's also important to use like a data security checklist to help with ensuring that you cover the grounds in terms of communicating adequately about the Data Protection Act. Periodic SMS or emails or WhatsApp reminders will be very useful elements to support your communication strategy. Former presenter from OIC mentioned the response plan, the incident response plan. Critical to that is creating an incident response team. The team will form a part of executing that response plan with clear escalation protocols, well-documented processes, and defined reporting timelines will be very important. We have just rolled out our own at the Ministry of National Security. We're open to share that information with the JCF when the time comes. The IRT should develop, test, and continuously seek to improve the incident response plan, including conducting post-incident reviews and identify lessons learned. It will be critical to simulate breach scenarios through regular exercises geared at assessing preparedness with a view to refine response strategies for more effective incident handling. These scenarios are critical. That's how you'll know who is to speak, what is to be said, how the communication happens. When in crisis, we can all lose all that training. So it's once we build in that scenario testing, it becomes second nature, who is to do what. So it will take some time. ICT must-haves. I know the next presenter will speak on ICT in a more detailed way, but it is important to implement robust information security controls such as data encryption, access restriction, multi-factor authentication, secure disposal of sensitive information will be paramount. To support compliance, the use of specialized tools such as the Data Protection Impact Assessment templates are recommended. Data mapping will support maintaining a centralized inventory to effectively track data flows and storage locations, ensuring greater visibility and control over personal data handling across the organization. Fostering a culture of privacy is important because it reinforces, integrates, and communicates. That's what it's about. Mandatory training for all staff, refresher courses to be conducted annually, tailoring training for high-risk units, and promoting a privacy-first mind shift. Monitoring and auditing is another key element. To enforce effective data protection compliance, there will be a need to conduct regular internal audits and reviews to assess adherence to the policies and the legal requirements, utilizing metrics and key performance indicators such as incident reports, access requests, training completion rates, and data disposal activities. They will all be important to monitor performance and to measure the improvements in the adherence to the Act over time. It is important to establish consistent meeting schedules to review these metrics and address gaps, because this is how continuous improvement will be driven. To drive continuous improvement efforts, it will be prudent to establish strong feedback loops by incorporating insights from audits, the incidents, and the staff suggestions into policy and process enhancements. Legislative monitoring by staying current on legal developments and adjusting policy as needed will be required. Conducting periodic maturity assessment of the compliance program to evaluate its effectiveness and identify areas for growth and improvement is also paramount. Documentation and evidence of compliance, that's critical. If there's an incident, a breach, the OIC will want to see what has been done. So documentation will be very important. To support data protection compliance, maintaining comprehensive compliance logs, capturing data subject requests, consents, the DPIAs that were conducted, breach incidents that took place, and training participation are all forms of documentation. Those are crucial. An accountability framework will be required to demonstrate adherence through documented decisions and risk assessments. There will be a need to utilize incident logs as critical evidence of compliance, promoting transparency, traceability, and alignment with regulatory requirements. These practices collectively strengthens the organization's ability to meet the data protection obligations effectively. I just want to thank the JCF for this opportunity, and we look forward to further collaboration with the Ministry of National Security. I welcome your questions. Thank you for your engagement.
Thank you very much. Can I have another round of applause? It was a very interesting presentation looking at how we ought to operationalize data protection. I know that, you know, on a daily basis, any of us in any formation can identify the fact that our WhatsApp group chats of any formation, pick one, divisional or any sub-team, there is so much information that is dropped in there, and the assumption is that persons are going to protect people's personal information. That's the assumption. But there is so much responsibility that is involved in what we do on a daily basis. But one of the things I'm encouraged by is our own engagement with the ISO 9001 process. You know, you mentioned documentation, and one of the things that we learn is document what you do and do what you document. And so what is documented is what gets done. And the other thing that I think many police officers in this organization have become acutely aware of is the importance of systems. Systems have no friends. Systems have no feelings. Put in place the right systems and make the systems work. Yeah? And so I think that is now, I think we are at a good time in the JCF where what we are doing in the modernization and the transformation is in lockstep with the mandates of the Data Protection Act. So I think we are at a point where we are, the take-up is easy and the receptiveness is there. And so I think that the compliance with the regulatory and policy framework will be manifest. Well, at this time, we have another presentation, and our presenter is the Divisional Commander for the Information, Communication, and Technology Division at the JCF. He's a Superintendent of Police with over 20 years experience. He looks young, but he has over 20 years of experience in the JCF. He's Ivoree's boss? Oh, really? Look at that. By the way, I'm very proud of Ivoree. I was Ivoree's homeroom teacher in high school. I taught her sociology. So you must know, say, me hall. But during Basco's career, he has been a very important figure in ICT in the JCF. He has established CStats. He has established Ops Insight. These are things that commissioners of police have gone abroad and demonstrated and wowed the region with our ability to collect data, to collect statistics. And so he's quite apt to speak to us about what the JCF is now doing with data protection. So over to you, Superintendent Basco.
All right, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Just allow me to share a little moment. Each time I walk in this lecture theater, I remember when I applied to join the force. I remember my mom is a disciplinarian, so during the process of recruitment, she insisted that I always wear my shirt and tie. But at the time when we were about to get the call and we were doing our final briefing before joining training school, not being a rogue, but I decided that we have gone through all the rigors. It's now time I can wear my polo shirt and my khaki pants and come. However, on approaching that door specifically, I realized that the instructors were sifting the crowd, sending some persons outside and seating others. I got a little wind and they said that, listen, persons who weren't dressed in their shirt and tie, those are the persons who are going outside. And believe me, I figured that out, and I ran from here, took a bus at the gate, went to Spanish Town, told the lady in the store, listen, I need a shirt that don't need to press. I want it now. Anyway, the lady assisted, and she used her hands, smoothed out the shirt, put it on, ran, got a bus, reached the gate, breathless. I ran back up the hill and reached. So at the time, I looked, trying to see how I can dodge the instructor to join back the parade. But luckily, I'm here today, and I'm happy. So I was successful. That's my icebreaker. It's my pleasure to be a part of this panel. Thanks as well for the invitation. We are at a time in the JCF where the transformation is a 360 transformation in